Welcome to Thoughts Uncensored. Before we start, please take a moment and join the Thoughts Uncensored army by clicking the subscribe button and the bell icon. Due to social media censorship, we have to work harder to spread our message.
Our best days still lie ahead, says Joe on his campaign page. How do we know what he may or may not do for us in the future? We can only gauge the future by looking at the actions of his past.
So if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Is it fair or unfair to get after you because of your gaffes?
Look, I think it's fair to go after a political figure for anything, okay? I don't get wrong things like, there is, we should lock kids up in cages at the border. I mean, I don't, and so I think there's a difference.
Well, it seems like he does. This show aired on September of 2019. By this time, it was proven that the picture used to spread the narrative of caging kids by the Trump administration was wrong. The photo was in an article that was used by an Arizona daily newspaper. They used the picture to shed light on an issue with the influx of unaccompanied minors at the border. Biden is no stranger to mishaps, so he repeated it in the Democratic debate that took place on September of 2019.
What Latinos should look at is comparing this president to the president we have is outrageous, number one. We didn't lock people up in cages. We didn't.
Today he said the following in his virtual town hall meeting.
We have over 120 million dead from COVID.
No, it's not a system difficulty. His staff most likely figured out what was happening and pulled the plug.
In another virtual town hall, he stated that we are in the middle of a pandemic which has cost us 85,000 jobs and millions of lives.
We're in the middle of a pandemic that had cost us more than 85,000 jobs as of today, lives of millions of people.
Hate didn't begin with Donald Trump, and it won't end with him. But this is a defining moment in our nation's history. A moment where we are once again called to fight against the same forces of hate and intolerance that we've battled throughout history, said Joe Biden. Listen to the following and tell me if his voice resonates. Hate and intolerance.
There are probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people out there that are just not very good people. But that's not who we are. The vast majority of the people are decent. We have to appeal to that, and we have to unite people, bring them together.
He claims that there are 10% to 15% of Americans that are just bad people. Does it sound like he is fighting hate and intolerance? He is talking about uniting 80% to 85% of people, but what will happen to the rest of those that are just bad people according to him? Listen to Senator Biden, as he makes a case for his 1994 crime bill on the Senate floor.
I don't care why someone is a malefactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. I don't care why they become a sociopath. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change their behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail, away from my mother, your husband, our families. But we would be absolutely stupid as a society if we didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks still exist, and we must deal with that.
It would be absolutely stupid if we didn't recognize the conditions that nurtured those folks still exist, and we must deal with that, said Biden. He was the vice president for 8 years. What did he do to improve the conditions since he realized its existence in 1993? The truth is that he haven't dealt with it. Is that how he will fight hate and intolerance?
In 2012, Biden said he told Obama not to launch the raid on the compound where Osama bin Laden was presumed to be hiding. In 2020, he changed that story. Let us listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I said, wait another 7 days for the following information. I wanted him to take one more day to do one more test to see if I said, we owe the man a direct answer. Mr. President, my suggestion is don't go. We have to do 2 more things to see if he's there.
When it comes to going after Osama bin Laden, you said, well, any president would make that call. But when you were a candidate in 2008, as I was, and I said if I got bin Laden in our sights, I would take that shot, you said we shouldn't move heaven and earth to get one man. And those decisions are not always popular. Those decisions generally are not poll tested. And even some in my own party, including my current vice president, had the same critique as you did.
Day, 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robben Island.
According to PolitiFact, there is no evidence to prove that Biden was arrested in South Africa in the 1970s while trying to visit Mandela. Biden has since walked back his remarks to say that when he exited the airplane, officials tried to separate him from African American congressmen or detained him. Biden sells himself as a civil rights candidate and have made claims about his work in the civil rights movement. How much of it is true? Let's take a look.
I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes.
When I was 17 years old, like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
You know, when I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on Sundays to go out and desegregate movie theaters and things like that, we'd do it through the black church. I was no big shakes, Reverend, in the civil rights movement. I was just a kid. I got involved in desegregating movie theaters and helping, you may remember Reverend Moyer in Delaware and Herman Holloway organized voter registration drives, coming out of black churches on Sundays, figuring how we were going to move. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award, a thing when I sat in black churches in the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never, ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm.
You'll have to wonder how low Mr. Biden thinks of the American public to make statements about marching in the civil rights movement and then retracting the statement only to lie again a few years later and retract the same statement once again. Wait, there is more.
Democratic presidential candidate Joseph Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania and come up after 12 hours and play football.
8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
There was no platform upon which they could stand.
The notion that every thought or notion or idea you'd have to go back and find and attribute to someone, I think is, quite frankly, ludicrous.
The problem here is that Senator Biden told his audience he'd just been thinking about these things, and he failed to give any credit at all to his famous British speechwriter.
You know, I was thinking on the way over here. Now that's a little too much because, as you point out, what's behind the words? What's there? And a lot of people, the rap on Biden has always been that it's just a surface.
I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't, and all the times I've ever used it.
But CBS News found a tape of a second instance.
It reappeared in the New York Times with a new charge, that Biden had appropriated a famous litany from the late Robert Kennedy about what the gross national product cannot measure.
It cannot measure the health of our children,
the health of our children,
the quality of our education,
the quality of their education,
the joy of their play,
or the joy of their play.
Biden gave Kennedy no credit. He has also quoted or paraphrased John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock, all without credit.
Joseph Biden admitted today that he committed plagiarism when he was in law school. He said it was a mistake, but that it was unintentional.
He quoted 5 pages of someone else's work without proper citation.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again.
He was given an F.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been dumb.
To the political community in Washington, it all seems of a piece. Plagiarism at law school, plagiarism on the stump.
The great communicator. Strike that. The great imitator.
You don't steal verbatim, or when you do, as he did 99% of the time, you give credit.
Biden's critics say he sells himself as a man whose words and visions can inspire a new generation in politics. But if the thoughts, phrases, and visions really belong to others, it's a form of false advertising.
Is it a wise idea, though, to take something that personal, anyway, from another politician and try and appropriate it to your own campaign?
I think it was a stupid thing to appropriate material that was really very personal, that was someone else's.
Most people didn't know who he was, you know, Joe Biden, and now they're going to say, oh yeah, he's the guy who plagiarized.
That's a lot of people.
Politically, that's devastating.
These clips are devastating. He looks like a Joe Biden wind-up doll with somebody else's words coming out.
If they're going to do things that are stupid as well as immoral, then they're probably too dumb to have the job of president.
Voters are going to have to decide whether he was dishonest or dumb.
Senator Joseph Biden may have more explaining to do.
The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and, in fact, ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
Joe Biden ranked 76th in a class of 85 at the University of Syracuse Law School. I mean, this guy comes off this whole thing as a flyweight.
Now Biden says Newsweek is right. His memory had failed him.
And I'd be delighted to sit down and compare my IQ to yours if you'd like, Frank.
Joe Biden was victimized by the truth.
Bye-bye Biden. He may not know it yet, but I think this is going to be very difficult for him to recover.
Is Joe Biden dead meat, yes or no?
I think so.
Bob?
It's in terminal condition.
Terminal. Eleanor?
Yes, unless he comes in third in Iowa.
Morton?
Dying.
I say dead.
This reporting was from 1988. He had to drop out of the race because of the issues you just heard. You would think that a man with common sense would have stopped making incorrect statements once caught. Mr. Biden has continuously made the same incorrect statements over and over. What are your thoughts? Are you ready to hand over the country to Joe Biden? Leave a comment.